Hello everyone, welcome to From the Star Wars Library, where Star Wars is in print, the Force is with the readers, and we are returning to 1979 for, finally, a much better Marvel issue than the one we saw last time around. I'm your host, as always, Nathan P. Butler. This time we're taking a look at the Marvel Series number 29. Kind of a cool cover there, albeit with Vader drawn a little weird. His face mask doesn't quite look exactly right, or maybe he just got a super long chin there. It's entitled, as it says down at the bottom actually, Dark Encounter. It's one of my favorite issues of the old Marvel series, especially of the stuff taking place prior to the events of The Empire Strikes Back. Now, before we go any further, let me note here that this is Carmine Infantino doing the art again, and this is Archie Goodwin writing the story. The team is back together and is going to stay together for most of the issues in the foreseeable future. First off, where else can you find this? Because you're probably going to want to read it after I describe it here for you. The best place to find it now is in Star Wars Omnibus a long time ago, Volume 2. Yes, if you pick this up, the first thing you will read is Whatever Happened to Jabba the Hutt, issue number 28, and it is god-awful. So skip it. And jump instead to this one, the second story in this omnibus, and you'll find one of the strengths of Marvel's storytelling is in the way it dealt with certain characters. In this case, one that I've talked about before, Valence. Alert, Valence. Now, I'm going to go ahead and open this up with some general comments, and I'm going to give you my recommendation on the idea of whether it's essential or not and such, but then I'm going to go into some specific spoilers. Now, usually I wouldn't care that much about spoilers for stuff like this because this is stuff that was published decades ago. This one, though, is so good, you might want to read this on your own and get that sensation of, wow, I can't believe that kind of stuff has just happened in a Marvel Star Wars comic. So assume that the more spoilerific stuff is going to be at the end of this episode, but I'll make sure you have your recommendation ahead of time. So, straight up, what do we have here? First off, we're still in the era in which Vader's Quest, which didn't get published until much later, but Vader's Quest and its events and the issues of Marvel that tie into that, because it's kind of repeating a Marvel event, they have not taken place yet. So Vader does not know who the Force user pilot was that destroyed the Death Star. He knows he was a Force user, and he knows he was a rebel pilot of some kind. So far, he has not been able to get the actual identity of Luke Skywalker. So in hopes of finding the pilot and finding his identity to be able to track him down, Vader is interrogating a rebel prisoner. He winds up finding clues about a man who may know. He's a rebel who had been on Yavin 4, but he fled. He deserted when the Death Star got into the system. He thought they were finished, so he took off, and now he regrets it to a great degree here. A guy named Tyler Lucian. Now, there's another guy who's been out there looking for Luke and found him at one point, but was conflicted and sort of let Luke live, and he's not quite sure what to do next, or at least he wasn't quite sure, and that is Valence, from back in Return of the Hunter, issue number 27. So it's only been 2 issues. We had an awesome issue 27, now we got an awesome issue 29, and in the middle, that awful issue 28 that was so blatantly contradictory with current continuity, at least, that they have now tossed that one out there, though at the time it would have been a very exciting read. This is an exciting read even now. So Vader's found out about Tyler Lucian. However, so has Valence. And both of these guys, right, the two big V's, Vader and Valence, are now closing in on Tyler Lucian's location where he has gone into hiding on Centauri's. Granted, though, Centauri's looks very different than the last time we saw it a few issues back, when Leia and Luke, they got rid of the yacht from Simon Grayshade and went up buying a different ship. I believe that was Centauri's, and yet here we are again. This crazy ruby flame lake. It's like this weird lava lake type of thing that's going on. It reminds me a lot of Mustafar, honestly. And at this point, those 3 storylines sort of converge. Tyler Lucian and Valence and Vader, and we get to see a knockdown drag-out, not surprising given the cover, between Valence and Vader, our 2 favorite villains at this point, more than likely if you're a longtime reader of this series, our favorite villains of the Marvel saga thus far. Ormantag hasn't really ramped things up just yet, but he will very soon. Once again, we get a really good issue here that delves into the psychology behind the various characters. Not so much Vader, but Valence for sure, and Tyler Lucian to a degree. But to go any further would be to spoil what I think is one of the best issues of the Marvel series with some great twists and turns along the way. So let me stop here and answer our main question. Is this an essential read? For the overall Star Wars universe, no. However, if you're reading the Marvel series, this is an essential read, particularly if you've read any of the previous stuff with Valence in it, right? The Hunter and Return of the Hunter, because both of those culminate in this. Think of them sort of as a trilogy that was separated by a bunch of issues in between from time to time. But it is the end of that tale. Again, if you haven't read those, it's not going to be as essential, but for those who did read those, this is an essential ending point. Not reading this would be like watching A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back and not bothering to watch Return of the Jedi. Or, even worse, watching The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones and not getting the bang for your buck out of Revenge of the Sith afterwards. I think even the prequel haters will agree with me on that one. So, not essential. If you're just a regular mainstream Star Wars reader, it's not going to affect anything in the broader EU, but for the Marvel series, this is a standout issue. You definitely should be reading it. Now, onward to the spoilers. If you don't want spoilers for this issue, now is the time to jump to the next episode in this series. Okay? You have been warned. What winds up happening here, and I love the way this plays out, is that Vader tracks him down, Tyler Lucian, to Centauri's, so does Valence. When Valence gets there, though, Valence is not there to get information from Tyler Lucian. He knows who Tyler Lucian is. He knows Lucian might have the information about the identity of Luke Skywalker. Valence already knows Luke Skywalker. He knows all about him. So, it's not so much that he's going there to try to get information to try to hunt Luke down. It's the opposite. He knows that eventually the Empire will find Tyler Lucian and be able to get information from him about Luke, which will lead him to Luke. And the last time we saw Valence, he was very conflicted because not only had he been, confronted face-to-face by this boy and the droids that had been repulsive to him, the boy with friends who were droids that went against everything he believed in, but he also was forced to face the idea that maybe they together are the embodiment of something that could be better. There's that line, of course, about C-3PO, or from C-3PO, about how, you know what, maybe if we see droids and humans being selfless towards each other and trying to sacrifice themselves for each other, that sort of envisions this idea of a better world in which someone who is a cyborg, part droid, part human, may not have to live in the state that Valence has been living in. The self-hatred, being shunned by society, the revulsion that some people have when they look at him. That Luke and the droids essentially represent a future that Valence wants to see happen. But that future, embodied by them, would possibly not be able to take place if we were to see Vader get his hands on Luke. He's going to protect Luke here instead of trying to hunt him down. He will do everything it takes, including laying down his life, to make sure that Luke is not captured. So, they wind up with this knockdown, drag-out, butt-kicker of a fight on Centauri's, right? He stands in front of Vader, basically pulls the Gandalf, and says, you shall not pass, except in nicer words. And Vader has a one-up on him, because Vader has the Force and is able to make Valence put his weapon down briefly. Tyler Lucian, for his part, is hiding up at the top of this big old tower over this Ruby Flame Lake, this place where you could basically, if you were to fall into it, you would die very, very quickly. It's waste and such, but think lava when you think of the way that it would work on a human body. And interestingly, Tyler Lucian has been looking down into this and thinking about suicide. If he had the nerve, he would commit suicide for having abandoned the rebel cause, but he's essentially thinking of himself as cowardly. So he goes, he hides. Valence is there essentially to protect him. You get the knockdown, drag-out fight in which Vader is actually brought to his knees by the, we call it the Iron Man, Tony Stark kind of ray that Valence can fire there. I still have trouble lining this up with the camera there, excuse me. And eventually Vader leaps and kicks Valence and beats him enough, hits him with a lightsaber, and causes Valence to be near the point of death. Okay? And instead of allowing Vader to get to Tyler Lucian, he grabs on with his cybernetic hand to Vader's ankle and is almost pulling Vader over into Ruby Flame Lake, where he would wind up dying. But instead, Vader is able to stab down with his lightsaber onto the cybernetic arm and severs it. Valence falls to his doom. He has given his life to save Luke. But now, in theory, that should mean that Vader can get to Tyler Lucian. He gave his life for nothing. I mean, he died trying to save Luke, but he didn't, right? He dies, Vader's still alive, he can go find Luke. However, right before dying, right before falling in, okay, Vader says to Valence, Lunacy. Even if I quit now, left you and the cringing coward in the tower, nothing would change. Others in the galaxy will have the same information. If I don't acquire it today, I will tomorrow. And for what will you have sacrificed yourself? To which Valence replies, within earshot of Tyler Lucian. Time, Force Master. The boy you seek, the one with the droids, is good. And he's growing. Someday he'll be your equal. Or your better. Any delay works in his favor. Increases his chances. Any delay. Then Valence, there can be no more. And then Vader kills him. Except Tyler Lucian has heard this. And once Vader severs the arm, once Valence is dead, as Vader is turning to go to the tower, what happens but Tyler Lucian throws himself from the window into Ruby Flame Lake, committing suicide to protect Luke so that Vader can't get that information. It's powerful. It's done mostly through art from Tyler Lucian's side of things after the initial time that we meet him. It's a powerful, powerful story from this era of the Star Wars universe. And unfortunately, a lot of times it goes overlooked because it's from the Marvel series, and that's not on a lot of mainstream modern readers' radar. Fortunately, it's back a little bit because of the Omnibus series, but it certainly is one story that if you're into sort of the darker tales of Star Wars, the more self-sacrificing tales, if you're into characters who are more complex in your comics, this might be one to check out. So if you checked out The Hunter and Return of the Hunter, you owe it to yourself to check out Dark Encounter. If you have not checked out either of those, honestly, if you just read up a little bit about who Valence is, that's all you need. You can still read and thoroughly enjoy Dark Encounter. I would recommend this to any Star Wars reader, not just one who is reading the Marvel series. But of course, we got that a little bit ago. So, great issue. Very happy to have had a chance to read it all over again. Kind of sorry to see Valence go, but it is good that Marvel is willing to off some of its new characters to continue forward in a way that is true to the characters, rather than compromising the integrity of the character just to keep them around for a little while, as so many television shows tend to do these days. With that, we'll wrap up this episode on this really good issue. Thank you for watching, and of course, may the Force be with the readers.